You guys might have seen the headline. Let's throw it up there on the screen. Joe Rogan said he's declined several times to have Trump on his podcast. I don't want to help him, said Rogan. Of course, the Times says, who has spread COVID misinformation is popular with many Trump supporters. First of all, do you have any data to back that up? Because that is not necessarily true. And I love that they are able to just post that with no, actual facts in order to belie that headline. Fine. But it does. Here's what happened. Rogan did an interview with Lex Friedman. He said, I've declined to have him on the podcast multiple times because, quote, I don't want to help him. He said, I think he's chaotic. These are all things. If you listen to Rogan, he's probably said this a million times. As a reminder, he even has that new policy, which he set out. He goes, I don't want to interview politicians. He's like, I don't want to be seen helping anybody. And I think legitimately, you and I having interviewed him, talked to him, been on the show twice, I don't think he doesn't enjoy being at the center of this like maelstrom of politics. It's not something that he wants. So anyway, people project on him all sorts of things, which he isn't. The problem, though, is that the Trump people are now very pissed off at him, with Steve Bannon now taking a shot. Let's throw this up there on the screen. Bannon tears into Joe Rogan and his, quote, low information voters for not wanting to platform Trump. So here's what Steve Bannon had to say, quote, where is he about Spotify putting this guy's rap videos and making money off it? Why don't they notify the police? Why? What is Spotify executive saying?
Talking about that Highland Park.
The Highland Park shooter, of course. He goes, Spotify is an accessory before the fact, just like the parents are. And he goes, you got Joe Rogan over there trash talking Trump. I don't give Trump any platform. No offense, he doesn't need your platform. He doesn't need your low information voters, continued Bannon. Okay, Trump deals with high information people. Your audience couldn't handle War Room, couldn't follow it, start talking inverted yield curve, your eyes would cross. So, don't trash talk and take money from Spotify as part of the problem. So, I'm just going to reveal a little bit of information here. It wasn't too long ago that I was contacted by somebody who works for Steve Bannon who wanted to get on the Joe Rogan Experience. I declined. I'm mostly 99.9% of the time. Somebody's like, hey, can you connect me with Rogan? I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. And he was one of them. So just so you know, he didn't have it above him to try and get on the Joe Rogan Experience.
He was happy to talk to the low information voters.
He was happy, and when he wanted to get on the Joe Rogan Experience whenever he had his people reach out to me in order to do that. But yeah, it's just like, first of all, this idea is actually very anti-Bannonism. The idea of low information. It's like, dude, they're low information people, AKA non-voters, AKA non-politically activated ones, are the ones that you always said that you were for in the White House and are the reason that Donald Trump became president of the United States. Deeply insulting. You're actually talking about here, people were probably disproportionately more likely to vote than not. Clearly, they're listening to somebody who occasionally has, newsy-ish type of information, and, it just cuts against the entire idea that Trump or that the audience itself is somehow the problem and reflected in Rogan, when really they're there to have a good time. There's nothing wrong with that whenever they're doing so. So anyway, I thought it's so hypocritical by Bannon and deeply coping, given the fact that, like I said, I know he wanted to get on, or at least the people around him wanted to get him on at some point.
Listen, we've, as we've discussed here before, and I've discussed before, Joe Rogan, of course, is not a perfect person, no doubt about it. But I would take the information that is being spread on his show over, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, because there's actually a depth of conversation there that is, oftentimes, not always, oftentimes, delves much more deeply into the issues we're facing than the surface level partisan bullshit that we get in cable news. So that's number one. Number two, I think in terms of whether or not he should interview Trump, I actually, maybe this is an unpopular opinion, I don't know. I actually would like to see him interview Trump.
It would be
Obviously,
tough.
It's his show, he can do what he wants with it, but it would have to be the case, though, that Trump would submit himself to the full, 3 hours or whatever, and I don't think he would ever agree to come in the studio and do the thing that our regular guest does. And so, if Trump is trying to have it on his terms, a shorter interview, more controlled by him and his handlers, then absolutely he shouldn't do that.
So I've interviewed Trump probably 2 hours in total across 4 different times. I don't see how it could work. And the problem is he's a steamroller, number one. He would not let Joe speak. He'd be like, excuse me. And at a certain point, he was the president, at least when I was interviewing him. You have to give some sort of deference, and you can't be completely confrontational because then they're just going to cut it off completely. He just speaks in multi-paragraphs. It's very difficult to get in there. He's a real rambler, and I don't think Joe would get a lot out of it, and I don't think the audience would necessarily get a lot out of it either, because Trump is also a poser. Like, he's never answering the question in a real fashion. He's always play acting.
I feel like Joe's good at cutting through that kind of bullshit, though, especially if you give him enough time. Now,
but I don't think Trump would submit himself to that.
Right, exactly. Now that's the thing. And like, ultimately, look, obviously, if Joe doesn't want to do it, he doesn't want to do it. Right. But the idea that if he had him on, it would automatically be helpful to Trump, I don't buy that at all. Because I think over the course of, a lengthy interview, I think he could do a lot of things that would expose himself in a way that, the mainstream press has never known how to handle Donald Trump. And I actually have more faith in Joe to do a better job with it than most of the interviewers who have tried to talk to Trump.
The worst case scenario is like the Nelk boys whenever they sat down with Trump. He spouted off for like an hour and a half on a bunch of election bullshit. And they were like, yeah, Donnie, that's right, Donnie. Sitting there like drinking their stupid seltzer.
But even that, wasn't there a moment from that even that was kind of like revealing? I remember there was something from that we covered.
We covered the fact that it got taken down by YouTube, which I thought was really dumb. I mean, I think it's fine for people to see the president as a moron if they want to, and spend time with these guys. Like I said, my big beef was that those guys were wearing shorts with the president, but whatever. They can do what they want. They have a very successful business over there, the Nelk gentlemen. I think that it's interesting the perspective of, can you have a productive interview with Trump on these type of platform? I just don't know if it would be possible, given his steamrolling, given how wedded he is to so much of this crap. And he does get angry and bristles whenever you do poke him or push him in the direction that I think Rogan would have to. Otherwise, he'd have to just sit back. And, that's a bad look, too. You don't want to get steamrolled. I don't think his instincts are incorrect at all to just say, you know what, like, I'm sick of this shit.
I don't need any of that.
I don't need the shit. Why does it?
I guess the way I see it, I totally understand where he's coming from, and I would probably make the same decision. But it's not clear to me that in terms of like what the public would benefit from, that it wouldn't be a benefit to have Rogan 3 hours with Trump.
Sure.
Again, I don't think that's possible. Like, I don't think there's a universe where that is an actual possibility, because I don't think he would submit to that type of situation where he really doesn't have control, where it can go as long as Joe wants it to go, and all of those sorts of things. And his handlers aren't there and all of that. I don't think he would submit to that ultimately because, he's too fearful and too controlling of how that might ultimately go. But, if that was a possibility in the universe, I do think actually the public could benefit from it, and it would be more revealing than what you typically get in the mainstream press.
If they were all willing to do it, I would love to see it.
Right.
If Biden would actually, and again, for real, like actually talk openly. It's just, in my experience, these guys are so buttoned up. They're unable to open themselves up to any sort of critical inquiry, and they're just always full of shit. They're always lying.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a reason why we don't interview many.
Yeah, exactly, because they have all these bullshit restrictions, rules. Just so people know. Oh, it can only go 8 minutes from 9:42
and we want to see 10. Your questions in advance.
Where's the questions in advance? And it's like, no, that's not happening here. And then they're like, well, on CNN they do. I'm like, I don't care. They don't work at CNN. It's just one of those things where they have a very set rules that they like to operate in, which is mostly cable, where they have all the power and they can control access and all that. And when you remove that, they don't really know what to do. And then they don't want to put themselves in that situation. Ro Khanna, at least one of the only people who's willing to come on here, and I'll be like, hey, what do you think about this? What's actually happening?
Whatever
good or ill,
he's
got his problems too.
He is down to answer any question and
he'll at least
engage on anything. I appreciate that.
Well, he understands the power of what you can get and who you can talk to when you come on the show. But for many of these people, they're such boomers. They don't even really understand it. And like I said, I've met hundreds of these people, politicians and more. I've met maybe 3 or 4, I think, that could have a real free-flowing conversation because they're not genuine people. They're fake.
Right.
Like, to make it in this business, you have to be fake as possible. So everything ingrained in them from the day they ran for student body president or whatever has turned them off from being able to be a good guest. Again, That's my opinion.
Yeah, and to hold up that artifice for 3 hours is very hard. You know, if you get past the 10-minute talking points, the whole thing kind of falls apart. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.